and welcome back to World Talks. I'm Anna Jabłońska. Now, the streets of Venezuela's capital, Caracas, have been the scene of open fighting between opposition supporters and security forces for several hours. Joining me right now is Estefania Melendez, former ambassador of Venezuelan interim government to Bulgaria and Western Balkans. Hello, ma'am. Thank you very much for joining me tonight.
Hello, thank you very much for the invitation.
So please tell us, what is the situation like at the moment? Now, we know that both candidates declared themselves winners. So what has to happen for this dispute to be resolved?
Well, as you well said before, on Sunday, 28th of July, we have this presidential election. We have to make clear, first of all, that this election never reached the conditions to be considered democratic, transparent, and fair election, as it was full of irregularities, as you well said. Maria Corina Machado is supposed to be the opposition candidate, and starting there, the regime of Nicolas Maduro never allowed her to run to the election, as many other democratic leaders. So Edmundo Gonzalez was the candidate from the opposition to run the election. Well, the regime, as you may know, in Venezuela, there is no separation of power. The electoral committee is fully controlled by the regime, so it's not independent. And what we saw on Sunday was a massive participation in Venezuela of the people that is determined to recover the democracy, to the change of Venezuela. And of course, the electoral committee, in the end of the day, declared that Maduro won the election, but they actually haven't shown the proof of the numbers they provide, which is not matching with the numbers we have. Even when we didn't have fair conditions in Venezuela, we are able to get 70% of the reports directly from the machine. As you know, this is in Venezuela, we vote with machines. Mm-hmm. And the numbers getting from the machines, even with the 70% that we could get, we suppose to be able to get 100%, but the regime has tried to do the impossible for us not to take this proof. And these numbers directly from the machine say a completely different story. 70% for Edmundo Gonzalez and not even 30% for Maduro. Mm-hmm. So that brings it to the point that Maduro is actually putting to himself almost 3 million of votes that he didn't have.
Now, we see the determination when we look at the pictures, when we look at the protests, but do people have enough power to actually win this war? War in quote unquote, of course, quote, for their freedom.
Well, I think that we have 25 years fighting for this, and during all these years, it has caused also the major migration crisis in the region. Today, we are 8 million of Venezuelan abroad. This 8 million of Venezuela, almost 5 million of them were able to vote, but the regime didn't allow them. So you also have to consider how we had 5 million of people that were not able to vote abroad. And what does it mean also to have 8 million of Venezuela abroad? You have a society that is separated, that is broken, families that has been separated, that we are all around the world. This brings a huge pain in every Venezuela. So we want this to change. We are determined to change this situation. But of course, Maduro and the regime, this is a dictatorship, doesn't want to allow this. But we have the proof, we have the votes, and we believe that the world should support us on this struggle and should not allow this situation like to be situation like Belarus in 2020 to be repeated in Venezuela.
Now, well, I'm going to ask you about Belarus, but I still want to ask you about Venezuela because, I mean, you have the proof, the numbers are real. Now, do you think that international community is going to do something if it didn't already? I mean, are there any voices from outside of Venezuela that are supporting the opposition in this case?
Well, they have to push on the Maduro regime to show his numbers, of course. He doesn't have it. He didn't allow international observers from the West to come to Venezuela. Even the European Union removed the sanction to the head of the electoral committee before the election, some months before the election, like to show that they want the dialogue to be in the situation and also to contribute with the change. And the answer from there was to not allow the observation, the mission from the European Union. And, well, what was the observers in this election? Russia, for example. They were actually the first to legitimate the fraud. So you've seen many statements for Latin American leaders that will not recognize the victory of Maduro because he cannot show it, he cannot demonstrate that he really won. Because in our Venezuelan constitution there is law about election, how they have to be transparent and how this electoral committee has to demonstrate that these numbers are actually real. And this is not happening right now. It was just a statement from them declaring Maduro winning with this 51%, but they actually don't show the numbers. So
but do you think they will have to show the numbers? Are you saying that eventually they will have to show the numbers, the real numbers?
Mm-hmm. Well, as I said, it's a dictatorship. Mm-hmm. Based on the law in Venezuela, they have to show the numbers. This is an audit that has to be followed. The world to recognize that this was a fair election, they have to see this report. This report has to be public. That's what is in the law in Venezuela, but they don't want to show. Even the general prosecutors say that they won't show anything. They don't need to show anything. Mm-hmm. But then I believe that the international community should push. They are actually pushing on this direction. The Latin American leaders such as Chile, Ecuador, El Salvador, many countries, even Brazil and Colombia, they are requesting to Maduro to show the numbers that he claimed his victory, which they will never show because they obviously doesn't have it. But we have the reports from the machine, and from these reports, Edmundo Gonzalez got 70%, Maduro barely 30% of the votes.
Now,
so that's why the people are on the street.
I understand, and we'll see for how long they're going to stay there, because you mentioned Belarus and you compared the two situations, but Lukashenko is not making anything of the protests. In fact, he's arresting the opposition leaders. There are thousands of people arrested in Belarus as we speak because of the protests after the fraud elections. Now, what do you think will happen in Venezuela? Do you think Maduro will follow Lukashenko's footsteps when it comes to arrests and social unrest?
Well, now that we talk about Belarus, we have been very close with Svetlana Tikhanovskaya and supporting her on their struggling. The Minister of Foreign Affairs of Belarus was recently in Venezuela, for example, probably providing some tips to Maduro. And well, from yesterday that this protest started, we are counting that 750 are already detained in jail. Even today, it was most like a kidnap. One of the leaders of my political party, Freddy Superlano, was taken from his vehicle, police covering their faces, and took him who knows where. So there is repression. We know that this is the nature of the regime. They are doing repression against the peaceful protester. And you need to also put in context that Venezuela has an investigation officially open in the International Crime Court for crimes against humanity committed against Pacific protest in Venezuela. So, in Venezuela, there is tortures, there are political prisoners, and these numbers are rising since yesterday.
Mm-hmm. Well, the situation is developing, so for sure here at TVP World we will have a closer eye at the situation. We'll talk about the developments. Ma'am, thank you very much for joining me tonight.
Thanks, Lynn.
And thank you for watching World Talks. Stay with TVP World for more.